Today, I'd like to continue our series of reflections on happiness and joy, looking at that from both the perspective of a Buddhist and perspective of a Christian, and also taking a look at it from the scientific literature. One of the things that we talk about in terms of pleasure and happiness and joy is the hedonic treadmill. When one is a hedonist, and just seeks pleasure all the time, and your life is all about pleasure, you kind of get on this treadmill where, I want this pleasure, I want that pleasure, and all of a sudden, the more that we try to experience pleasure, the more we make pleasure the goal of our life and say, I just want pleasure, the more we become numb to its effects, and then all of a sudden we kind of are like, I thought this was pleasurable. It's not really pleasurable because we become numb, and we lose sight of what true pleasure is and what true happiness is. And it can happen to everyone. It's typical example is, of course, the person who gets involved with alcohol and drugs, and of course, mix in there the addictive personality. But the initial high, you've got to kind of keep going after it, and then all of a sudden you're like, why did I get myself in this mess? What happened here? And part of it, of course, is the personality where you're drawn to addiction, and so you need help to overcome that. But it's the idea of it doesn't have the effect that it once had, and what was formerly pleasurable is now makes me miserable, makes me feel awful. Richard Davidson, the neuroscientist, took a look at this and he says, the theory of what makes the brain happy, so studying the brain and trying to find, just from a scientific point of view, well, what makes for a happy brain? And he posits from his research that there are four independent brain circuits. So these are within the brain, but yet they're independent of one another. The first one is our ability to maintain positive states, our ability to kind of stay and focus on the positive. The second is our ability to recover from negative states, because as much as there are going to be positive states, there's also negative states, and we have to have the ability to recover from the negative as well as to try to sustain the positive to whatever effect we can. The third is our ability to focus and avoid mind wandering. And we often wonder about that. Sometimes the mind goes off. And what is it that actually allows me to focus and keep my mind from wandering? It can be difficult sometimes. All of a sudden we're focused on one thing and then we get another thought. But there is a part of our mind that can bring us back, although sometimes that is a challenge. And the fourth brain circuit that he has researched is our ability to be generous. That there is this part of our brain that allows us to give to others, to care for others, to be generous. John Barr, who's an expert on the science of the unconscious, talks about the three innate goals that we have that somewhat correspond to this idea of the happiness in the brain. And that is our goal to survive. Very important goal. We see it many times with people in disaster situations trying to survive. Survival is a challenge, but yet it's a goal that we have. We want to survive. We don't want to give in to the elements. We don't want to give in to dangerous situations. We want to avoid them in some way. We want to be able to survive, even when physically we're not feeling well. We want to rally and survive and overcome the illness. The second goal is to reproduce. We want to continue our species. This is a goal that we have to reproduce. And sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's spiritual, sometimes it's leaving a work of art, leaving a writing, leaving a book that we have made for our children, our grandchildren. But we want to reproduce. And the third innate goal is to cooperate, want to work together with others. We don't want to live in isolation. We want to create community. We want to build something together with others, not just do things on our own, because we know that that can lead to many a disaster. Experiment that kind of brought this out for John, famous experiment. The two 18-month-old children, so the children a year and a half, they were shown dolls facing each other. And it's funny, when they were showing them those dolls, they themselves became more cooperative. They got the message. That's the way it should be. We should be facing one another. We should be working together with others. When you think about it, one of the things that we often wonder about is about prejudice. If we are people who want to cooperate with others, why is there prejudice in our world? And he talks about the unconscious roots of prejudice. We are most wary of people who do not look like our caregivers. So we relate to our caregivers. They're the ones who have nurtured us, and so they provided food for us. They've tried to make us comfortable. So we relate to those who look like our caregivers look like. Our empathy does not seem to extend to those who are beyond the group. So our prejudice is related to the group that we are used to being with, the group that is familiar, the group that we're comfortable with. And that is because our caregivers represented a certain type of person. And so because they gave us care, and we want to emulate them, we relate to people who look like that. And people who don't look like them, we're suspicious of. And of course, this is on the unconscious level. We're not doing this in a conscious way to kind of, pick on certain people. This is, of course, all unconscious. We are basically, our Christian and Buddhist teaching would say, we basically are one group. We are one people. The desire and the ability to be generous, as in our neural circuits, the reflection of how our brain is wired. And we have this desire to be part of the group, to build the group. And really, it can be harnessed, this desire to be generous, to help others. And we want to help others on a family level. We want to build up our families, make our families stronger and better. We want to build up our communities where we live. If we see something wrong in the community or not going the way it should, we see people littering, we see people vandalizing, we see people abusing other people in the community, we get upset at that. And we want to change that situation. We want to intervene. And then we also want to be generous on a global level as we become aware of other people and other countries and their needs. We desire to reach out to them and to help them. We don't just want to help those in our family. We don't just want to help those in our community. We want to extend that beyond to others. We might start with our family, continue with our community, but then as our generous hearts increase, we extend that out to others in the global